Hello, everyone. Warm welcome to all of you back into Intersections. Our aspiration in Intersections is to do exactly that, is to create these points of confluence and connection between different aspects and parts of our life and of humanity. And today, I have the distinct honor and pleasure to break in some ways some new ground with us. And that new ground is the matter of spirit. In other words, when I have navigated the world of business school, the world of academic and professional life, one of the questions that I'm left with as a little bit of a puzzlement is as to why, when we do so much to nurture the intellect, and more recently, even to activate certain qualities of the heart as we seek to create a much more equal world, an equal society, a just society, why is it that for some reason in modern times, we tend to not very actively also invoke matters of the spirit? And so I can't think of a person within my network who I could feel more blessed with and joyful about bringing into focus for us as a catalyst for that conversation about what would it be if you and I and all of us were able to very comfortably and openly and committedly embrace, more of our soul's journey through everything we do in life and in leadership. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. I know many of you are already signing in to the chat window and sharing with us where you're calling in from today, etc. Please do so. Let us continue to build that sense of community here. I also want to invite you to share this, as best you can in your social media channels so that others can also be part of this conversation today. So it is a distinct privilege for me today to have in our midst someone who I am just so grateful for what it is that he brings to this conversation with us today. And this is the Reverend Phil Jackson, who is the priest in charge of the Trinity Church here in New York. Let me just share a couple of things with you about our guest today. Phil has had a very storied academic career from Amherst College to Yale Law School, and then ultimately also a degree in divinity from the Church Divinity School of the Pacific. He has served previously as an attorney in Honolulu, was the rector of the Christ Church of Ascension in Paradise Valley in Arizona, joins the Trinity Church in 2015 as the vicar, and was also named the priest in charge in January 2020, in some ways just before this huge cataclysmic moment in some ways in what we are facing in humanity's history today with the pandemic. And that's all I want to say with you about Phil. But what I really want to do is invite him into our midst so that he can share his story with all of us more directly in his own words. So Phil, it is a real pleasure and joy to have you in our midst. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, Hitendra, it is so good to see you and so good to be part of this group. I've been watching people logging on, and I saw a bunch of people from my parish, Trinity Church in New York. Can I just give a special shout out to all of them? Hey, everybody. Good to see you. Thanks for, I see that you got the money I sent you to be part of this. Thanks for being part of it. Good to see your names, if not your faces, unfortunately. But I thank you so much for having me on, and so good to see you. I don't know if people know this, but I first met Hitendra at a Columbia Business School continuing education class, and that he taught, and I just admired, loved, respected his work from the very beginning, and then I brought him to Trinity to do something for my staff, and we just stayed friends. And so this has been, your friendship has been just such a source of blessing and richness for me, Hitendra, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Father Jackson. I have over the years realized how much I need to learn, and I should learn, and I can learn from the audiences that one gets to be privileged to serve, like my MBA students and executives who come in that program that you've talked about. But you are just like an outshining example of that, where I stumble into such gold from within the folks that this work, has me and get a chance to cross paths with. And I can just reciprocate what you just said. It has been a tremendous joy and a privilege for me to have this association with you, which is why I want to share you, with others here, in addition to reconnect you with some of your own congregation. Let's do this. Let's start by just taking a minute to help people understand the path you're on. And then I want to turn it very quickly to your own personal journey. So by the path, I mean that you are an Episcopalian minister, right? And so what does that mean for those of us who are not very initiated into that aspect of the Christian, community?
Sure. The Episcopal Church is a Protestant denomination within the Catholic, within the larger Christian body. We were started when Henry VIII broke off from the Roman Catholic Church in the 16th century, and we are the American branch in the Episcopal Church in the United States. We're the American branch of the what's called the Worldwide Anglican Communion. We're an autonomous branch. We don't have a pope. We have a presiding bishop. His name is Michael Curry, Bishop Michael Curry. Some of you may remember him because he famously preached at the royal wedding and did such a beautiful job preaching about love. Let's see, what else can I tell you? That's about it. I mean, some things will come up. You know what I want to ask you though? Can we start with just a moment of silence to settle ourselves and center, and then we'll go from there. But I'd like to sort of welcome everyone in who is online with us, and ask you to just settle in for just a minute. And let's ask the Holy Spirit, since we are speaking of matters of the Spirit, let's ask the Holy Spirit to be present with all of us, wherever we are on this call. Come, Holy Spirit, come. Be present in the hearts of your faithful people. Amen. Thank you, sir.
Oh, thank you. That was much needed and so beautiful. Yeah, so let's get to then take it from the broader, church to your role. So you are the priest in charge of Trinity Church.
Yes.
And so what is that about?
Well, Trinity is one of the oldest Episcopal churches and one of the oldest churches in the United States. We actually predate the United States of America. We were founded in 1697 in New York, and we are in the same place that we have been, not in the same church. We're actually on our third church now, but we have been in Lower Manhattan ever since 1697. And my role as priest in charge is I am, I guess the best way to put it is I sort of oversee the entire, all aspects of the life at Trinity Church.
Right. And, I learned something delightful, in fact, from you the other day, which is a connection between the institution that I serve and the institution that you serve. Could you share that with everyone?
Yeah, a lot of people don't know, but Trinity Church founded King's College. I think it was in 1752. And King's College, after the Revolutionary War, had to change its name because the young country was no longer expressing an allegiance to the King of England. And they changed the name to, ready, Columbia College. And so Columbia, where you teach, I'd like to say we founded you, buddy. We founded you.
Right. Well, I'm so glad, besides founding us, that we found each other, in this moment as well. So, Father Jackson, let's turn the attention for a minute to your roots and your journey. And I am curious about it because when I interact with you, when I see the storied, for example, academic career you pursued, the early professional career you pursued, you don't feel any different from any of us who are here. You pursued the same kind of, hungers for outer success and some of these, accoutrements, that we get when we excel academically and professionally, etc. And yet, it seems like at some point you pivoted into a life of tremendous purpose and soul searching and a nurturing of the spirit and a service to the community, of a form that very rarely so is a choice that we make. And so I'd be very curious as to how that journey began for you and what got you to the place you are. Could you talk a little bit about your personal journey?
Sure. I grew up in Chicago. My father was a dentist and my mother a homemaker. And in my household, we really did not go to church at all. In my house, growing up, for my parents, education and success in education was the highest value. And my older brother went off to Harvard, and I went off to Amherst, and my little brother went off to Williams. My older brother is a cardiologist now. My younger brother is a judge in California. And from a very early age, I wanted to be a lawyer, and I wanted to be a trial lawyer, and I wanted to be a really good and successful trial lawyer. That was and that was very important to me to do that. And I sort of arranged my life around that goal. And so I ended up going to Amherst, majored in history, graduated with honors, and did the next step up the ladder and moved down the Highway 91, I guess it is, down to New Haven to go to Yale. And you know, the funny thing is, I started recognizing almost immediately that something, even though this had been this great path that I was on and this great goal that I had, that I just wondered if it was the right path for me. I just I don't know how else to say it, but Hitendra, something inside of me felt a little bit of a disconnect. But because I did not grow up with any sort of overt faith or faith teaching, I really didn't have language for it. I didn't have any way to express or to describe or to talk about that inner sort of disjunction that I had. So all I had was the path. So I just stayed on that path, which I'm sure many of the people listening on have probably been on that path as well in their lives. So
this path you're talking about is this socially sort of, shaped and influenced, set of, priorities and values and education we get as to what like a successful life is about.
Exactly.
And then you're saying something started to happen that made you want to look deeper. And what was that moment and what was that chapter like where you started to do a much more serious investigation for yourself?
Well, that's where it got interesting. After I graduated from law school, instead of going back to Chicago, which is what I was supposed to do, I, on a whim, moved out to Honolulu, and got my first job there was selling golf clubs to Japanese tourists. I did that for 2 weeks, and realized that maybe if I wanted to stay in Honolulu, which I really loved Honolulu, I should probably find a more lucrative job. I ended up working, getting a job as an associate attorney at a wonderful small boutique law firm in downtown Honolulu, and did that for took the bar exam, passed it, started practicing for these guys, and really loved it at first. After a couple of years, I think the best way to put it, Hitendra, is I realized I began to feel that I began to feel that what I was doing was not what I wanted to do forever. And I don't know how else to put that. I don't want to put any fancy language on it. I didn't have any fancy language at the time. I just felt like I just kept asking myself, is this what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? But I didn't know what else to do, because this is what I had spent, and by this point I'm 27 years old. I had spent 27 years getting to this thing. And now all of a sudden it felt as if that thing was not maybe what I was expecting, or maybe. And okay, I will use a little bit of language that I wouldn't have used then. It felt like my life felt at the time like it would not be fulfilling. And I wouldn't have used that language at the time, but that is what I will say now. And so I'm practicing law. I'm in my late 20s, and feeling like, wow, how am I going to do this for the next 50 years? How are we going to do this? And out of the blue, truly out of the blue, some voice inside of me said, Phil, you should go to church. And Hitendra, I can't, just something inside me just said you should go to church. Mind you, I never went to church. I never went to church. So I looked in the, you'll love this. These are the days pre, this is in the late 80s, early 90s, pre-internet. I looked in the yellow pages under church to try to find something that might look interesting. And I found a Unitarian church that I went to that was near my house, and went there one Sunday. And then the following week, I was driving back. I'm in Honolulu. I'm driving back from the University of Hawaii, where I had some legal work that I did. I'm driving back, and I'm at a stop sign, Hitendra, and this voice, again, this thing sort of inside of me. I'm not talking about like an auditory voice, but something inside of me said, "No, there, go there." And I looked around, and to my left, there was this church, and it had this sign that said St. Clement's Episcopal Church. And it said Holy Eucharist Sunday at 10 a.m. The only thing I knew on that sign was Sunday 10 a.m. That was the only thing that made any sense to me at the time. And so I went the next Sunday. And the best way to put it, Hitendra, is that from the very first opening of that service, I felt like I was home.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to put it. I felt like I was home. I felt like I was with family, and I felt like family was speaking a language that I had never heard spoken, but apparently had always known.
Yeah. That is so beautiful. That is so beautiful. And I am finding moments there that I'm relating to in terms of some of the stirrings that that I've gone through. I am sure every one of us who is hearing you today is connecting what you've gone through with at least some moments, perhaps fleeting, perhaps some they dug into, or they just kind of deflected, right? That they might have felt as well. So that is so powerful and so beautiful. Let me ask you this: in those moments, how is it that you were able to take pause and really pay attention to that inner voice? Was it a habit and a discipline that you had already built? Was there already a fair amount of, let's say, scriptural study that you were doing, or a connection with some kind of higher power? Or was it just something so fresh and different and new that seemed to speak to that yearning that had started to get generated within you, that you just couldn't ignore it, even though it was a fresh, new, experience for you to listen and tune into that inner voice?
Yeah, I like to say that God used a 2x4 upside my head to get my attention on this thing. And what happened was that I started going to this church every week. I would go, and after a little while, I was introduced to the priest. Actually, the priest came up to me and said, "Who the heck are you? And what? Come talk to me. Tell me what's going on." So we became friends, and there was a family that kind of adopted me because I was a young guy, and they would give me things to read. And what really did it, Hitendra, was one day I was reading a chapter of a book that the father of this family gave me. And it was a chapter on what's called the atonement, the doctrine of the atonement in Christianity, which is that Jesus died for our sins. And I read this chapter, and then this was on a Saturday, And I went out and I took a hike in the I lived up in the mountains above Honolulu, and I went on and took a hike. And as I'm taking that hike, I don't know how else to explain it, but for about 10 minutes, God actually showed me that the atonement was true and that Jesus died for my sins. And at that moment, I'm totally by myself. There's no one around. I don't know what prompted me, but I said, Lord, I give you my life. I give you my life, and I will go wherever you want me to go. And just right there, that was my conversion experience. I was a knuckleheaded 27-year-old. There was no great background in this. But I tell you, when God speaks, and I believe that God speaks to all of us, every single one of us. It's hard not to listen. Our world makes it very easy to not listen, but when you hear God's voice, it's profound. It's profound, and it was a real blessing. And it turned my life on an axis, just Hitendra, like boom, like that.
Yeah. Well, that is so beautiful. I see that vision of you stepping away from your life, being on that hike, being in nature, maybe some amount of quietude, and you perhaps just created the conditions where, when you combine that with the hunger that you'd started to really broadcast out there, that I'm searching, I'm looking, the combination of that just allowed this voice to come and guide you towards that next step, which is beautiful.
Yes, and maybe what happened is I allowed myself to hear it, And I think, because I sometimes think that's true for all of us at one time. We know, God's out here speaking, right? Yeah. And we distract ourselves and we have but I got to do this, got to do that, and God will wait. God will wait.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It reminds me of a quote from my spiritual master Yogananda. He said that when we become silent, then God breaks his silence.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I like exactly. It's like God saying, "Are you done yet? Are you done talking yet? Are you done? Because I got something I'd like to say, but we'll wait till you're done, and then I'll say something." Right.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So that starts you on a whole new journey, and it got you into divinity school, and it got you into a new vocation that has become your life ever since.
Yeah, one thing I guess I would like to say about that next chapter in my life of going to seminary and becoming a priest is that, because I had been on that achievement track for so long, one of the things about the achievement track is that you end up living most of your life right up here in your head, right up here in your head, and we develop this very robust sort of thinking system, and our ability to use our brains and think that we can believe that we can think our way through anything or through any problems or anything. And we have this kind of, muscle builder kind of head, if we could see what it looked like spiritually. And frequently what happens is that our soul is not fed and developed in the same way when we're on that track. And what I really learned, Hitendra, in those first several years is that I had to move out of here, the head, and move down to here, into the heart and into my soul. And I needed to spend as much time, and I think this is true for all humanity, we have to spend as much time developing our spirit, our soul, whatever you want to call it, as we do our heads. We prioritize the head and the intellect, and the intellect's a good thing. I love air conditioning right now. Glad we have it. But we don't spend as much time on our souls, and we end up mostly feeding our souls the soul equivalent of junk food. the soul equivalent of McDonald's or just junk. And the high achievement world that many of us live in or lived in or were shaped by largely pretends that the soul doesn't really exist, or that the whole, to be a whole person, like you could go do that on the side. The thing that I find most challenging about liberal arts education, which I love, is that it doesn't, even though it's purportedly interested in the whole person, it spends almost no time on the development of that thing which will turn out to be the most important thing about us, which is our soul.
Yeah. Father Jackson, you made a very powerful comment the other day in our conversation on this very theme. You are on the board of trustees of one of the very renowned colleges here in America, Amherst College, which, by the way, I visited a few months ago when we were doing college tours for my daughter, who just was graduating from high school, and I remember it very fondly. It's a beautiful community. It's a beautiful campus.
Oh yeah.
And they're lucky to have you, in that capacity. But you mentioned something about what you're seeing with this generation of high performing students on a campus, and you also cited a book that gave you a little bit of perspective on this. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. What I said is, and I love young people and seeing them develop and grow. What I've noticed since I've been on our board of trustees, and so I get to spend more time on campus, is these young people are smarter than we were. They work harder. They do more interesting things. My only thing is, I just worry again about this question of are they just doing the next thing to do the next thing, or are they really thinking about what it is what purpose is in life, or why the reasons why they're doing these things. And I feel like, so this book that I mentioned to you is called The Meritocracy Trap, which I recommend to anyone. It's a great book, and it sort of is point on with this, that we've got a generation, we're sort of cranking out generations that work hard and have to jump through these hoops, and yet the meaning for these hoops, other than getting getting the next right thing, so that the right kindergarten gets you into the right grammar school, then gets you into the right high school, then gets you to the right college, and then the professional school to the right job. And at the end of that cycle, or at the end of that path, I think what worries me is that we're gonna end up with people who say, why did I just do all that? Why did I do all that? What was the purpose of that? And so I think at Amherst, I just love seeing the kids and talking to them, because they are thinking about this stuff. They're smart, they get it. And I think one of the things that the pandemic time, and then the racial injustice protests and whatnot that are going on, is they're engaging in things of the heart, of the soul. They're given an opportunity to really see things in ways that might alter the approach to that meritocracy trap. So it's a rich time we're in right now. If we take advantage of it, it's a really rich time.
Yeah. There is, it's interesting, because I've been reading some Pew research, which as an organization does a fair amount of discovery around where people's, opinions and positions are on matters of faith. As I'm sure from some of the research. But it's interesting because the percentage of, and so, most of their, focus is on America, but they do some international as well. I'm a little bit more familiar with America here. So I'm speaking from that vantage point, recognizing, respecting, we have a global audience here. But in America, for example, one of the things they've shown is that there is a large number of people who actually do believe that there is some kind of like higher power and force out there. There is something more to them than just their mortal frame. And yet, to me, it's an irony that that is something that is not actively invested in as part of our, social milieu and dialogue and just everyday happenstance conversations and in business or in the university, etc. We're almost taught to be very thoughtful and careful to, draw that boundary and kind of like keep that more into, like you said, just like you do that on your own time somewhere here. And one of the things I'd love to have you explore for us, because you counsel so many, both within your congregation and you're also telling us now here at Amherst, that if there are those amongst us who recognize the importance of that, not just the legitimacy, but the importance of that, and they want to deepen their anchoring in that, but they don't have that good fortune of having that voice just come to them with great clarity like you did in that moment yet. They haven't had that yet. What are some practical steps they can take, both to go through their own process of discovery, to connect with their soul? And then the second part would be to also learn to more authentically express it in a world that, doesn't like actively invite you on an everyday basis to engage and express that, openly. So,
can I, if you don't mind, Hitendra, can I put that into to answer the question, to put it into a little larger framework that helps me understand what the issues involved are? And I call that sort of the care of the soul and the two halves of life.
Sure.
And what I mean by the two halves of life, and I'm stealing this unabashedly from a good friend of mine, the author, Father Richard Rohr, a Franciscan priest and friar and just all around wise man. He talks about the two halves of life being the first half he calls the path of ascent. That's going up. And in that first path, we could call that also the achievement path, right? It's where we're largely taking things on and building ourselves. So we're going to school, we're getting a job, we're getting married perhaps and starting a family. And in that first half of life, we're mostly concerned with the questions of the ego. And those questions are questions like, what kind of job am I going to have? How do people look at me? How do they treat me? Do I get the respect that I deserve? Yada, yada, yada. Those kinds of questions are questions of the ego and the first half of life. And they're the appropriate questions for that first half of life. What Richard Rohr says is that sometime, now this is not on a clockwork kind of thing, but sometime between the age of 40, let's say, and 60, it could be earlier, it could be later, but sometime we hit what he calls a crisis of limitations. And that is a loss of some kind. That's a loss of perhaps a job or of a relationship or of health or a loss of someone close to us, a death. But something in this period we hit up against and shows us that life is actually limited in some way. And Rohr says that this crisis of limitations is God's way of inviting us into the second half of life, which he calls the path of descent or going down. And in that path, which he also calls the path of the soul, our soul starts asking its questions, which are entirely different questions than the questions of the first half of life. When we get to the second half of life, we start asking ourselves questions like, have I loved well? Has my work been meaningful and with purpose? What happens when I die? Who is God? And what does it mean to have faith? those are the types of questions that we start to ask ourselves when we get into that second half those of life. Those are the again what he calls the questions of the soul. And the secret of the path of descent, and this is where practice can come in just a minute, I'm going to talk about. But the secret of that path is to begin, instead of to taking things onto oneself, is to begin to give oneself away. To begin to give oneself away. So if you're a person who feels a longing, and you could start this now, right? Even if you're not in the second half of life. But you can start this now with some practices. Begin giving yourself away. Go volunteer for something. Mentor people, right? Mentor young people. Work for a service organization in your spare time if you can. But begin to give away the self. Because what Rohr says, and I have found this to be universally true, Hitendra, is that the purpose of the second half of life, the descent, the giving of ourselves away, is to begin to prepare ourselves for death, which is the great giving away of oneself, and the giving away of oneself and the aspect of life that we are most uncomfortable in the West talking about. But it's a preparation for death, right? When I mean, like, how would you like to approach death? Which, by the way, we all are going to, right? We all are going to. Would you rather approach death afraid and terrorized by it, but ready to give it away, to give that last ounce of this life we cling to, even be ready to give that away in gratitude and happiness at the end of our lives? How would you like to approach that? So some of the things we can be, the biggest thing we can begin to do is to give ourselves away to others in service of others. That's numero uno, because that's what the big ticket secret is to give yourself away. Is to give yourself away.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And it's very stirring to hear you speak about death with so much, significance, and invite us to reframe our relationship with it. Incidentally, that's going to be the topic of our next webcast, next week. Because it's something that I'm also deeply drawn to, is to think about what is humanity's relationship with their own mortality and with that moment, of dying, and questions about the afterlife, and how does that influence and shape, our choices in everyday life. I mean, it's a conversation I want to actually have with you. Let's talk, it's such a rich topic unto itself. Let's talk a little bit offline. If you have time, Phil, and then I want to see if I can get your voice represented in what we talk about, on this topic too, next time. But thank you for invoking that. Now, let's turn to one very important influence in your life, because you've been so thoughtful in citing some of these readings and references that have shaped your thinking. And there's one which we should also do justice to. And I know about it because when you came to Colombia and we had our first interaction, you shared such a beautiful and inspiring story about your journey towards this teacher and his place of like physical habitat and what you experienced in making that pilgrimage that I've never been able to forget. I've never been able to forget that moment of how you shared something so beautiful from your life. And I'd like you to offer that gift, to our community here as well. So can you talk about this one very pivotal influence and your journey to getting inspiration and learning from it?
Sure, I'm always happy to talk about, and people on the webcast of my congregation will know this, but I'm always happy to talk about Thomas Merton. Thomas Merton, who I consider a living, even though he died in 1968, a living spiritual father of mine. Merton was a Roman Catholic Cistercian monk, Trappist monk, who lived at the Abbey of Gethsemane outside of Louisville, Kentucky for 27 years. He went into the monastery late and stayed the rest of his life. And even though he went in for solitude, he would eventually become an international figure known all over the world for his spirituality, his openness, and in particular, I think the story I'd like to reference, if I can, Hitendra, about Thomas Merton, is memorialized at the corner of 4th and Walnut in Louisville, because it was a pivotal experience in Merton's spiritual life, and one that I can resonate with on many different levels. What happened was in 1958, I think it was February of 58, he had been in the monastery for about 17 years at that point, and he had to go into town. They're about an hour away from Louisville, so he had to go into town for something. And he finds himself at rush hour standing on the corner of 4th and Walnut. And you can, I think we may have a picture of it to show people later, but it's memorialized. You can actually stand on the corner of 4th and Walnut. Walnut is now Muhammad Ali Boulevard in Louisville, but it was 4th and Walnut back then. He's standing on the corner, and when he wrote about it later, he's standing on the corner at rush hour, and all of a sudden, he said he had the awareness that he writes that I loved all of these people, and that we were all he said, I see them all shining like the sun. And in all of them, he saw the radiance of God in all of us. And he had what is a remarkable mystical experience, but one which across faith traditions is reflective of, to me, an authentic experience of God, because it is unitive. That is in Merton's experience and experiences that I have had, others who I know, people I've read from 1,000 years ago, from across tradition. The experience of God is one of unity, that we are all of this, not just us humans, but all of creation, all of everything, all of soul, all of being is one. It's unitive. And the most anti-God thing we can do is to break ourselves off into individual chunks, is to individualize ourselves and to think that we are outside of the unity of God's being. Merton taught me that deeply. And from that moment in his life, he then embraced, like truly, I mean, you talk about like a car wheel just like screeching off in a different direction. Merton then got interested in world faiths, became interested in Islam, Buddhism, Taoism, and just went way into exploring faiths around the world. And he ended up dying in Bangkok at a retreat that he was helping lead on the intersection between monasticism and the Buddhist tradition and the Christian tradition, and exploring that with Buddhist monks. And he was tragically electrocuted. It was a freak accident, and in 1968. But it was interesting that this unitive experience he had on the corner of 4th and Walnut in Louisville just once again just changed his life into a different trajectory. It's beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah. I hadn't known about him until you shared, your story about him, and it's led me down the path of studying him, a little bit, and it's been so rewarding, because I love to find these examples of mystics who are both deeply committed to their path and at the same time deeply celebratory, of other traditions and paths that some people are doing their own good work in to come to ascend the same mountaintop, and in his case, he really lived that principle so powerfully and so beautifully. A lot of his writing is so eloquent. His quotes and, ideas are just so well phrased and all of that. So for those of us who haven't been aware of Saint Merton, right? Until now, I would recommend, as you're doing, Phil, that he'd be a tremendous resource for people to study. And I love the way you talked about how he's a living presence, in your life. It reminds me of a story of this one individual who goes to this well-known kind of spiritual figure of his time, and and goes to him and says, "Sir, I'd like you to be my spiritual master." And that individual looks at him and says, "I think you already have a path, isn't it? You already have a spiritual master." He says, "No, but I want somebody living because he's dead." And so this gentleman, the spiritual master, looks at him and smiles, and he says, "He is not dead. He is living. You are dead. You need to wake up."
I love that. I love that. If I could say something else about practice. So for people that are listening that may be interested in something like this. So Gethsemane Abbey is a place I go to every year on retreat for 5 days. And this year I had the opportunity to bring some of my staff from Trinity on retreat. And it's a silent monastery. You're not really allowed to talk, and they pray 8 times a day. The first service is at 3:15 a.m. and then the next one's at 5:30. I mean, it's they're the monks are very rigorous in their discipline. Now, of course, you can do whatever you want there and go to whatever the services you want. But so I brought this group from New York City to the countryside of outside of Louisville, Kentucky. And before we all went, people were asking me questions. They'd say, "Phil, I don't know if I'll be able to do this. I don't know if I'll be able to be quiet. I don't know, I tell you, Hitendra, within a day and a half, we were all saying, "Oh my gosh, how can we come back next year?" One of the things that we can all do beginning now, because now's a good time, is encourage a little silence in your life, a little silence, a little solitude. Turn off the Netflix, turn off the because a lot of that is junk food for the soul too. But encourage, take some time to meditate, to practice silence, to practice solitude. It's all good things. And you just showed a little picture there of the monks at Gethsemane. There they are. There are a couple of them. There are 6 of them in habit, walking, taking their afternoon walk. What else did I send you? Some more? What else did I send you? Oh, this is interesting. So this is the graveyard at Gethsemane, and Thomas Merton, who was their most famous. He wrote all these books, and he's famous all over the world. And when I first went there, I was this big Merton groupie, and I went there, and when the brother monk was checking me in, I said, "Listen, sir, can you tell me where Merton's grave is? Because I want to go, I want to go see it." And I assumed that it was going to be this, kind of granite monument to Thomas Merton, and probably a statue or something. And he goes, "You see that tree out there?" He goes, "Go down towards the tree. It's the one second row in from the left." and Merton's marker is, and I love this reflection on death, Merton's marker is just like everyone else's. It's just like everyone else's. And isn't that true about death, right? Our marker is just like everyone else's.
Yeah, that's so powerful, so beautiful. Shall we keep going with these pictures?
Go on the next one. Let's see what we got. Oh, here's the church at Gethsemane, and so the monks, when they're doing the daily offices, are in these stalls here, and then down at the far end is where they do communion. Next, beautiful. There's the entrance, And you see that little white sign at the end of the road there? It says, the sign says, silence only beyond this point.
Yeah, that's beautiful. There's something really soothing about this view and this little experience we are getting with you of being there. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Here's another one. This might be what you were referring to. Yeah.
This is the corner of 4th and Walnut, and the city of Louisville put up a memorial plaque for it, and it describes it. On the other side, it actually has his writing on it, but there it is. And what I love about that so much is that, it was the commercial center of this city, and he just happened to be there on an errand, and yet he had a moment of God that changed his life forever, right there, right?
Yeah.
In the midst of the city.
Yeah.
Next, what you got?
By the way, so we've had on this show, one of our other, dear guests has been Jeanette Petrie, who made this movie on Mother Teresa and served Mother Teresa for many years. I was just briefly mentioning her to you. Yeah. And she just texted me, yesterday and said she's looking forward to this so much. She said Thomas Merton is a favorite of mine. So yeah.
If you're on, hello. Good.
Yeah, I know she's going to be really enjoying this moment here with you. Is Thomas Merton really alive in the memory of people of Louisville? I mean, are they sort of like really continuing to be aware of this great personage in their midst?
Not sure as much.
Yeah,
the papers and things are at Bellarmine University, which is in Louisville. But it's our age, right? I mean,
yeah.
People. I don't get the sense that he is when I go there every year. I've been going for 12, 13, 14 years. But certainly is. He certainly is for me. He certainly is for me.
Yes. That's beautiful. No,
I have another one for you.
Let's see.
Oh, that's the actual corner right there. Yeah.
Okay.
Go on. Oh, this is at Gethsemane. This is Merton's hermitage. Merton lived. He was finally granted. For years he petitioned to be able to live alone as a solitary. And finally, in about 1960, he was allowed to move into this hermitage, and this is where he did all of his writing. This is his study here. And he pretty much lived solo. Next, let's see here it is on the outside. This is Brother Paul, who takes people on tours. It's just a really peaceful place. Shalom. I love that. I love that.
Yeah. That is so beautiful. You were speaking. So thank you for sharing that. Your journey with learning and connecting with Thomas Merton. You were speaking a while back about giving yourself away, and I just brought up Jeanette Petrie, and I talked about her work with Mother Teresa, and I remember like you were just sharing your impressions of meeting some of her missionaries of charity, some of the nuns of her order. Because can you share that?
I was several years ago when she was canonized. I was invited to be the Episcopal Church representative in New York City to the canonization mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral with Cardinal Dolan, and so I went, and it was remarkable. It was lovely, but the truly lovely thing was afterwards I got to go to a reception where her sisters who live in New York were all there, and I got to tell you, Hitendra, the most joyous. I mean, it sounds corny, but like people, these women just radiated a joy, and I mean not happy, like sort of it, but joy, authentic joy that was just but like breathtaking to be around. I don't know how else to put it, but it was such an honor and just a blessing in my life to even get to meet some of them and to be around them.
Yeah,
I would love to met sometime to find out. I know you said she's done a documentary on.
Yes. She made a documentary with her sister on Mother Teresa, which was very critically acclaimed, and she's working on another bigger project to take all that archival footage that they have and put it into a form that can be really memorialized for the ages, for posterity, right? Digitally and made accessible in all the right sort of communities. And so but anyway, I'm going to be thrilled and honored to share that documentary with you all. For those who may be interested in it yourself, although I know you may have seen us talk about that in that previous webcast, this is just a documentary you can find on Amazon. It's called Mother Teresa. If you want to search for some names, you can look for like a well-known name, then Richard Attenborough, because he was the commentator in that, and perhaps also the executive producer of that documentary. So Jan Petrie is her name, my dear friend who's come on the show. Father Jackson, we are living in a time where, on the one hand, there are some tremendous new aspirations being unleashed on this planet for taking a relook at how we are comporting, with each other, and how we are really connecting with humanity. The anti-race movement, anti-racism movement, right? That is, surrounding all of us. And part of that is also having people, seek to invite a revision of our understanding of history to get more closer to the truth. And some of that is opening us up to a new reflection on America's roots, the founding of the country, the Declaration of Independence, the founding fathers who are part of that. And in some ways, you're connected, to that history because of George Washington, our first president. And he had something really strong in the history of, his presidency and Trinity Church, etc. Could you just talk about that for a minute? And more importantly, talk about what is your counsel and your point of view to those of us who might be, let's say, hurting about wanting to feel a great sense of patriotism and connection and inspiration from the roots of the country, but at the same time are, having to absolutely honestly face up to some pretty dire and dismal, aspects of the history as well.
Absolutely, you bet. Like you said, Hitendra, Trinity, since we date to 1697, we are deeply implicated in everything that is part of the United States, that would become the United States. If you stand at the door of Trinity Church and look straight down Wall Street, you can see the spot where the African slave market stood at the corner of Water Street and Wall. There's a marker, there's a plaque. Our current church, which was finished in 1846, just think about that year I gave you, 1846. In 1846 in New York City, you would have seen slaves, black slaves, walking up and down streets. You would have seen slaves working, probably helping build Trinity Church. I like to say also that in 1839, I think it was 38, 39, when Frederick Douglass broke to his freedom and came north, he crossed over on a boat from the New Jersey side to Manhattan, and you can actually see the spot where he landed, and it was about a 10-minute walk from the spot where he landed to St. Paul's Chapel, which is one of our churches. We need to know this stuff. We need to know and remember that New York was based on the slave trade. That's where its money came from. It was deeply implicated. Don't forget, New York was very, very ambivalent about the Civil War and being in the North. Very ambivalent about that. At the same time, and this is what we were talking about the other day, Hitendra, at the same time, I think we also, when we approach history these days, and I was a history major in college and still read fairly widely in history, we have to remember to approach history with a fair amount of humility. And what I mean by that is, now there's this, there are a lot of movements to tear things down and get rid of excise things from historical memory. Okay, I mean, I get the impulse. I caution us, though, and this is where the humility comes in, and I ask people, in 200 years, what do you think they're going to say about us? I can tell you some things they're going to say about us. They're going to say they knew about global warming. They knew that if they kept living like that, if they kept their reliance upon fossil fuels, if they kept living the lifestyles that they wanted to live, they knew that it was having harmful effects on the world that they would pass off. Shame on them, right? Shame on them. We will be judged for things like that. We will be judged too. If we think that somehow we have reached the apotheosis of historical morality, guess again. Guess again. So, I think it's imperative that we learn about our history, but I think we should also approach it with a little humility, as I said, with a little humility. Now, all that being said, the Confederate monuments, this is tear them down. Get rid. That was the losing side. Tear them down. Get them out of there. Done. But I think that we do, though, have to approach history with humility. These are people like us, and living in times that, living in times like us. That's where I wonder what people say. What they will say in 50 years, like, why wouldn't they wear masks? They knew that wearing a mask would cut down on the transmission of this thing. What was so hard about wearing a mask? And yet people don't, right? I mean, so there you go.
Yeah. That's I resonate with that a lot. So thank you for bringing that up and sharing that. That thought experiment. What a powerful thought experiment of looking back 200 years from now and asking how will humanity of that time judge humanity of this time. It seems to suggest that maybe one way to really be energized also and inspired by some of those contributors of the past is to see humanity as a work in progress, see a certain evolution that is happening, respect the early bricklayers of that path, who, kind of like started us off on something which was imperfect and small, but directionally it was taking us to where we are today. And then it is our responsibility now to add more bricks to that path, isn't it?
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. It's a beautiful way to put it, Hitendra. Add more bricks to the path.
Yeah. So beautiful. We are on time. It is, with strong mixed feelings that I am noting that and needing to bring us to a point of like closure because this has been such a beautiful conversation, Father Jackson. Any sort of like final thought from you? And let's turn it to like, if you had to invite our community to take on some one thing in their lives in the days ahead, if they are inspired by your story to deepen their own self-realizational journey, what could that one final counsel or idea from you be?
To remember that everything we do has the potential for adding to the sum total of good in this world, and to have the courage to add it, because it could take courage to add to the sum total of good in this world. But do it. And we all can do it and have it to do. That's what I would say, Hitendra.
Yeah. That is so beautiful. We're hearing some really heartfelt comments from our friends here. I'm just putting some of them up here for you to celebrate and enjoy as well. Because these just speak, I think, to the sentiments that everyone is feeling silently in their own space and time with what is going on. So I want to remind us that if you're part of the regular webcast, or if you're not, I certainly welcome you back. If you'd like to join us again next week, like I was just telling Phil, our focus is going to be on what death can teach us, how to, in some ways, reframe our relationship with that really powerful and one certainty that there is about the future, which is our own mortality. And so we're gonna come back and talk about that next week. Just in closing here with you, Father Jackson, I just want to highlight some of the things that we've taken away from you. We've started with you sharing your story and how climbing up that ladder of success, you finally started to pay attention to certain stirrings from within. And then there were when you had that hunger and you had that interest and that attunement, there was something that spoke to you. And so you got practical guidance and advice. And it came first from within, then it came from some small actions that you engaged in on the outside, like that Yellow Book moment, which was amazing. When we spoke about that, about churches. And when you went on that hike and you got a higher power, you had God speak to you in a very clear way, but you'd created those conditions for silence where that could happen. Then you had the courage to really, in some ways question and feel comfortable in being contrarian to some of the, tried and tested paths, to really find your path. And in doing that, you finally got to connect with the community, initially with that Episcopal church, where you went to, where they took you in their fold, but then ultimately beyond that to the school and the training and the service and vocation that you've been part of. So it got more and more solidified over time. You also spoke to us about how there's this, soul enriching need that all of us have, and that you're seeing in the young people, that they're deeply otherwise talented, but that part sometimes when it's missing can be a very hollow space that any or all of us are yearning to fulfill. You talked about this midlife kind of moment where you go from the what did you call it, the ascending to the descent, the ascent to the descent, and to give yourself away. That was such a beautiful idea, this idea of giving yourself away until your dying breath, because we ultimately have to get there where we, as you said, have to give everything away. That was really powerful. And then you talked about Thomas Merton as such an important influence, and what an incredible force in being very devoted to his faith, but also being very integrative and wanting to borrow and learn and understand from others as well. That was so beautiful. Yeah. And then you've finally taken us to this place where you've also helped us recognize that humanity is on this journey, and we can all collectively take it to an even more beautiful place by making our contribution, being that perfect drop from our side in this ocean of humanity. Yes. Thank you so much. Can we end with another little moment of silence and guided prayer from you?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Let's take just a moment. And I want to thank the Spirit for being with my friend Hitendra and with his community that is here with us today. I want to thank you all. Your hearts can be felt all the way here to New York. Your love for this world, your love for the work and the passion that you do, your concern for humanity. Let us ask the Holy Spirit to bind us all together and show us that we are one, a unity in all of creation. Amen.
Father Jackson, and to all of our friends here, this Namaste sign in India means I bow to the Spirit in you. And so that's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
You were such a blessing to me. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, very grateful for your presence today. Take care, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All the best.